And we're live.
Hello and welcome to Live Coding Happy Hour for whatever the day this is, October 27th, 2017. I am Dave Slusher. With me is Josh Nearius. Longer introductions in a second. What we're going to do this week is continue our celebration of Hacktoberfest. I didn't get to be a part of it last week as Andrew Barnes took the place of all the other participants. But Josh and I are now we're going to look at some of the implications of what happens if you did all the stuff from last week. You've forked some repos, you've tried to commit some code, you've made some pull requests. What now? That's what we're going to begin with. And we may end up, it'll be kind of a potpourri show because we're going to have a number of kind of shorter topics this week. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce my friend.
Your friend called beer? Oh, wait, you're talking about me.
Yeah, you're the friend.
Yes, so I'm Josh Nearius. I'm a developer evangelist here at ServiceNow in the platform business unit. You know how I know it's actually the 27th? I know it's the 27th because it is Super Mario Odyssey release day for the Nintendo Switch. And I pre-ordered it back in August, and I just got a notification just moments ago that it's been delivered by FedEx. So this is going to be the longest live coding happy hour, which I'm actually excited to be at, but also really wanting to be playing Mario Odyssey. So anyway,
I need a soundboard so I can have that nerd alert.
And proud of it. So
okay.
I guess I should talk about that. So I've got a Sketchbook Brewing Company. It's a brewery up in Evanston called Orange Door IPA. Good stuff, actually. They've been up there for a long time, and nice little microbrew.
All right. And I am Dave Slusher, developer advocate with ServiceNow in the platform business unit, developer.servicenow.com. We both basically work for the group that puts that site out. And that is our team, basically, when you go there. And I am drinking. Never had this before. This is a complete impulse buy from the grocery store. This is a 3rd Street brew house. I know nothing about them. And this is a Sugar Shack Maple Stout. So it's getting a little colder. Yeah, nice. It's getting a little colder down here. This seems seasonally appropriate. So let's see. And by a little colder, I mean it was like 62 degrees today.
See, we hit the 30s the other day, and I'm like, oh, we've hit a threshold now. So it means different things.
Yes, absolutely it does. Okay, so let me go ahead and start sharing my screen if I can find the buttons. You take a week off, and this really gets difficult.
See, I know how I felt last week. So with I was trying to figure out how to start the YouTube stream, and as everybody who is probably waiting for it to start knows, it took a minute, but glad you're back.
All right, so there we are. Okay. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at my fork of Josh's repository. So this one right here, this J Nearius SN Slack points thing, that is the canonical repo for this whole thing, right? Everyone who forked and all the directions that we blogged and when we went through this last week, this is the source repo for everything that's happening. All right. So I forked from it. 15 different people have forked from this blog or this repository at this point. Okay. So I have done some work on it. I've got some code. If you look at it, this branch is one commit behind J Nearius master. So what this means is that Josh's main repo in the master branch has progressed further than me. It's now got code that was accepted via one of those pull requests. It has advanced down the field, and I am left behind. So what do we do now? And just out of curiosity, I was just double checking my branches. This was really just a trivial branch. It was done for demo purposes. So I don't actually have any particular work in here. So that is important, right? Because some of what we're going to do here in a little bit could involve losing work. If you had somewhere in the process, if you have finalized work, you might lose some. So you have to be careful of that. And you'll have to double check me because this is one of those topics where I'm kind of going by the cookbook because I don't have a huge wealth of knowledge. I realized as we started going through this, actually, I was telling you the other day that I have never used Git in production ever in my career because the job I had before ServiceNow was a Subversion shop, and I've never been at a place where Git was the main production flow. So this is kind of academic to me. I've never actually done it on a day-to-day basis. So, okay.
I was going to say on that, so one thing that is good is the method that we're actually going to use today to bring code in. Right now, it's just targeting master. So if you do have feature branches, those feature branches should remain okay because the steps we're going to take are only going to impact master, at least the way we're taking them today. So that part's good.
All right, let's put a pin in that and try to remember to come back to master versus feature branches after we do all this stuff.
Yes.
Because that does have some implications. But let us not talk about them yet. So let us go through here. So I published this blog post a couple days ago where I reiterated, this is Josh's fantastic I love this diagram so much, of kind of what's going on. And then it's got the steps to walk you through what's happening. So the best way that we found to do this, we're not 100% sure if you can do this via GitHub desktop. We actually, in our production meeting, which was about 6 minutes before we went live, we kicked around whether we wanted to do this in GitHub desktop. We weren't sure it was doable. So we may experiment offline and post some information about this. But what we're going to do is we're going to do this all from the command line. So let me go ahead and just start a new shell. I'm just going to go into my temp directory on my Mac here because I don't actually care about the repo itself other than as a tool to do these command line magic we're about to do. So what we want to do first, and again, you need to be my eyes on this, Josh, because if I might do something a little wrong here. So I'm going to get my clone Earl for my fork, right? What we wanted is to pull my fork down.
Yep.
So we're going to copy that. I'm going to come over here, and this again is on my Mac. I'm going to clone this. So we're pulling it down. Bip. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, so we've got that down. Now let me come back over here, and we're going to go back through these. So we've cloned it to my repo. We want to move into. All right, so now we're actually in the repo of the SN Slack points thing. So we're going to come down here, and this is the one that's a little bit tricky. I wanted to make sure when I wrote this blog post that I was not losing people. Having just got the Earl to my fork of this, now what we need is the clone Earl for the original. I'm going to open this in a new tab. So this is, again, Josh's canonical version. We're going to get the Earl for that one. And we're going to come over here and do this, which is, and I probably should have done, I'm doing this in the wrong order. Let's do it this way. Cut and paste this. Git remote, add upstream, and then we're going to add that Earl. So we're just defining basically a logical name for this thing. And what we're basically saying is the thing named upstream is in fact this Earl. So now we've got, is there a thing to list my remotes?
I think there is. Yeah, maybe just get remote.
Get remote. So I've got origin and I've got upstream. And so so now we've got that kind of why don't you call it this logical name for that thing. All right. So now we're going to come over here. We're going to do a git fetch of upstream. So we're basically going to pull down the code that exists on the upstream, which again is Josh's branch, not my branch, but or Josh's original thing, not my fork. Okay. So git fetch upstream. So we've done that. We've actually pulled down the code. You can see where it's coming from. It came from GitHub, JNereus, SN Slack points thing. So now we've got the 1.0.1 code is actually now down in my repository. If we look, we're going to see some timestamps have actually changed. If I do git, what is it, git status? What's the git log is what I want. We'll see that it's actually got some commits that are newer than what I had in the original thing. So now we're going to checkout master. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I'm already in master. I'm not 100% sure what this one is doing.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually doing anything in this case. I mean, so basically what this would do if you weren't in master is it would basically it would bring master into your, I think, your local directory structure. So if you were, maybe say we were working on a different branch name instead of master, like V2 or V3 or something like that, we would want to change and use that instead. But because we're doing all of our code on master, it's just there by default.
Okay. So now what we're going to do is git reset hard upstream master. So what we're saying here is the code that came from upstream, make our master basically conform to that. Is that right?
Yeah.
And we're saying, and the -- hard just means, not sure what that means.
So what that's doing is that's going to discard anything that's different in your local directory. So I think if you reset without that hard thing, it would. I'm not exactly sure what to do. I think it would point your current. I think it would point head to upstream master, but it wouldn't actually discard any of your local changes. This just blows it all away.
So when I'm done with this, what I have is an exact copy. So if I have anything, so if I have like unpushed, uncommitted changes, they're disappearing here. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now, I guess the thing is because you're on the command line, I think by definition you'll always, because you've checked this out, or because you've cloned this on the command line, you should not have any uncommitted changes. I guess would be
not
the best
uncommitted. But if you have a change that had been committed but not pushed,
I
think you're going to lose that as well.
Well, so I think the really important thing here is that if you have made any changes to master at all, even if they're committed and pushed, they're going to go away. Okay. So this is effectively saying you're throwing away everything in master, which is why it's important to do your stuff in a feature branch. Otherwise, everything you do in master is just going to go away.
Gotcha. Okay. So basically your master in your fork, consider that really only as a source of code. You don't really want to commit code to that thing.
Yeah. And it's a little different than a lot of Git contribution workflows, because in a lot of cases your master is sort of yours and you would potentially merge code into that. But because for reasons we've talked about before, you can't do a real Git merge here. And so, that's effectively just the latest copy of whatever's upstream is the best way to treat that.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Blip. So now the head is at this merge PR 16. So in fact, when I did the log, that's actually confusing me here because I didn't see that. I didn't see that thing in. Oh, there it is. This is actually, you'll notice when I did the get log before I did the checkout master, I didn't see that line. I didn't see that commit.
I think it might have been the fetch hard, or the reset hard rather, that did that.
That did that. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go. We've got. So now we've got this tag 101 in this local directory. So your code from yesterday or 2 days ago is there. So now the last thing here is to come back over and git push origin. So we've fetched it from upstream. We've done all this reset magic here, and now we're pushing it back to, we're pushing master back to origin.
I might need to do another drawing for this.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, actually, before we do that, let's come over here. Now, after all of that, I'm going to reload my copy of the repository, and it will still say this branch is 1 commit behind. Did it reload that fast? Okay, so there you go, 1 commit behind. And let's also look. We'll see that last commit 8 days ago, 104F, blah blah blah. Okay, now we're going to push, and we're basically saying push my local master back to the origin, which is that Earl. And force means, I don't know, means just
it means like scary things, like, I don't know, it overwrites maybe the entire commit history of that branch or something like that. I'm not very, very good. I've also not worked with Git in production before this. In the past, I've used Subversion and CVS and other nastier things. But usually, and I think if anyone's watching that uses Git a lot, usually force is a bad thing. But unfortunately, that's just the way that goes for what we have to do here.
All right, so now I reload this guy, and what we should see is branch is even with JNarius master. latest commit 3 days ago, 312, blah, blah, blah.
Beautiful.
So at this point, my local fork now has the new code. So now if I'm going to go and do some work, what I want to do is now branch from here, right?
Yep. And the other thing too is, so on your ServiceNow side, so you'd want to probably create the branch. I guess you could create the branch here, or you can create it in ServiceNow, but you're also going to want to do an apply remote changes in ServiceNow in order to bring that stuff in.
Okay. And in fact, do you remember what was contained in that commit?
That commit had code to randomize the message. So there's a new script include called random message. There's an update to a business rule. So right now, if you look at your script includes, you only have 2. And
I just realized as I did that, I noticed I did the history and it wasn't it wasn't doing anything. And I was like, oh, this is not my first rodeo. I know exactly what is happening here. All right. So we'll talk to other stuff while we wake this up.
And this is your weekly reminder that we do the same thing that you all do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Whenever people complain about, how burdensome it is to have to wake their developer instances from hibernation, I think, boy, my heart really bleeds for you. We do this exactly as much as you do, right? So, okay. So while this is waking up, let's talk a little bit about so you did touch on this, is so we're just hard overriding master. So if we had stuff in master, if I had made changes, even committed them, and push them back to master, they would be gone now after all of that stuff.
Yep.
Which is why we want to stress that if you've got work that you could do this in most Git projects, this would not be a problem. You could do your work on master of your own fork. It wouldn't be a problem. But because we don't have the merging, and because we have to basically do like hard copies of everything to make sure the checksums and everything's consistent, we're going to lose things that you wouldn't lose in a normal situation. Which is why, again, we stress that you want to be doing your work on branches inside your own fork. Because even with all that stuff, if my work was on a fork, it's not lost. And in fact, if we switch over to my fork, which just has a little bit, just a little bit of silliness in it, you notice that my branch is one ahead. This branch is 1 ahead and 4 behind J Nereus. So we did all that stuff to master. It did not affect this branch. So that hard force stuff, we pushed the local master to the remote master. It overwrote everything. It did not overwrite my branch here. So everything that I did there is still in the state that I left it. So, it's what that means is that all that code that Josh did is not on my, his last 4 commits are not in this, but like for what I'm doing, if I were to submit a pull request from this, what I'm really looking at doing is the difference between here anyway. So that should, in 99% of the cases, unless we were actually working on the same line of code, this should be fine.
Yeah. It also highlights why when you look at the contribution workflow, it's important to have really to limit each branch to one feature that you're working on. So don't go out there and do a whole bunch of stuff that crosses a whole bunch of issues and put it all in the same place, because it's just going to increase the likelihood that it's not possible to merge it in. If you're just doing very specific things, even if it's behind, you're probably fine. And then the next time you create a new branch, you will be up to date. So it just helps keep things a little bit more sane for you as a contributor.
Right. And so that does actually get to another topic, which we will talk about in just a second. So now we're back to life here. Here is my my instance is back up. So let's come over here. And now if I come back to Studio and I come over and I look at the source control history, we should see at this moment, we should see that the last commit is over here. This is me. This is my one commit that we see on my feature branch. What we're going to do now is apply remote changes. And in fact, let me switch branches from my feature branch, which is where we are, over back to master. This will take a minute. And maybe we'll go a little faster than this. Can be a not super fast operation. So to continue the thought that we had a second ago, this is like, we can't stress enough that not only do you want to do your work on the feature branches, but the absolute smallest set of changes that you commit and the smallest set of changes that you submit a pull request for are always going to be better, because the smaller the commit, the smaller the pull request, that lowers the probability that there's going to be some kind of conflict or some kind of problem that keeps it from merging in. So,
yeah, definitely important, and yeah, it lowers the chances of there being a problem, and then it also, I mean, it just increases the likelihood that we'll be able to merge it successfully. And I think it's just as a general practice, whether it's with this or anything else, always try to group commits to really be small pieces of functionality as you go along, and then group those pull requests to be maybe a particular feature. So the one that I actually merged in was for randomizing the message, and that was, I think, a really, really good example of a great pull request in terms of its content. Actually, while this is still going, if you go to GitHub, take a look at that pull request, and we can look at the diff of what changed. And let's see here. It's going to be under closed, I think. Or no, it's not going to be closed.
This one right here.
Yeah, that's the one.
I remember the number.
And so if you do go to the files changed tab. Now, this is a little bit misleading. It says there are 35 files changed. Part of this is because of some of the kind of idiosyncrasies that we talked about last week, where there were some really no-op type changes where it was just a date changing or something like that and a last modified. So we're really going to ignore most of those. But the two things that did change were this script include, and I think we can ignore this filter. This is, again, some examples of stuff that comes through that maybe we didn't realize did. But here's the business rule. And so the business rule, you can look in that script and you can see pretty clearly exactly what it was before and what it is now. And so this is very nice and well contained, and you can see exactly what the structure is. And then if you keep going, there's another file. Yeah, this is the one. This is a script include. So, yep. And so this is a brand new script include. And so there was not a lot of thought in, didn't really have to put too much thought into this because it wasn't merging an existing script include. It was just saying, hey, here's a new script include for this new functionality, and just accepted it right in there. So this was very easy to merge, and I think was a good example of, this is one piece of functionality and it all is self-contained. So and that's just kind of a learning experience. It's a process to sort of figure out how big or how small you want it to be, and it gets more natural as you do it more often.
All right, so over here now we've switched the branch. You see, so we're on master. We're it's still saying my first feature, but let's view history. It should tell me.
There it is.
But I haven't applied remote changes yet. So how could that be in there actually?
So what might have happened, because you switched the branch, I think it would have actually. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Because you switched the branch, it effectively did the same thing as apply remote changes. So apply remote changes would be if you were on a branch and you wanted to reapply to the same branch you were on, and any switch branch is really the same.
I think we're actually seeing an idiosyncrasy here, because I think the view history is actually doing something different than, because if you notice down here, it says we're on 1.00. Let's go ahead. Actually, let's look at. No, look at that. Random message does exist there. That's interesting.
You know why? Okay, so this gets more interesting. The 1.0.0 is the version of the app in the sys app record for this application. And the 1.0.1 that we saw on the Git side was because I created a tag called 1.0.1.
Ah, gotcha.
I did not change the version number. So a little bit of another different best practice thing that I probably should have done.
Gotcha. Okay, so I was thinking we would have to apply remote changes, but we didn't actually have to, because switching the branches also applied the remote changes.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, that's pretty much what I wanted to show on this side. So that's the blog post is up at the developer relations blog. Unfortunately, I don't know the version of this to do for Windows. However you could do Git in a command line on Windows, whether that's in Cygwin or I don't even know. Honestly, I can't tell you anything about the state of Windows 10 command line. I've never actually touched Windows 10. I don't know anything about it.
I think it's actually going to be the same, because the Git command line tools can be installed. When you install the Git package, there's a Windows native installer, and it should be exactly the same.
Okay. All right. So that at that point, that's kind of that gets you through there. So if you are one of the contributors, if you've wanted to play along with this, then that's what you're going to need to do periodically when there are changes to incorporate. So then, if we come back over to my source, so now we say I want to do another feature, right? So now I'm going to create another branch, and I'm going to do it. So by being in master here, I'm creating it off of master. My second feature. We create branch. So now it's creating the branch, and I believe when this thing is done, it automatically pushes it, does it not? So if I come over here and look, I should see my branch over here. So now there's my second feature, and there's the branch. And you'll notice this branch is even with JNearest master. So, and we could even, can we do a diff between my second feature and my first feature? That I don't know how to do on here. It seems like it should be doable.
Yeah, it is doable. If you do
a pull request.
Yeah, you can choose your base fork and your base branch. Change your base from master to, yeah.
All right, and so at this point, then you can see these are in fact all the differences between my first feature and my second feature branch, which includes both the changes that I made would exist in there, and then also the changes that let's look for random. So this stuff is in there as additions, and then we'll also find all the work that I had done would be in here as well. I think as it would be in red because it would be a subtraction from the other branch. So this is the stuff that exists in mine and not the other branch, all the stuff in red. So there you go.
Cool.
All right. So there's my half of this. All right. And then, do we want to talk about anything else about the master versus feature branch? Do we completely cover that? I think we kind of explained why you want to do that, because you will, like we said, everything that's in these feature branches will not get wiped out by all these steps we did over here. If you really, if you really wanted to incorporate it, I don't know if there is any way to incorporate it with a stash. Like a stash and a switch. I'm not sure if that will do what we plan on doing.
Actually, so that's an interesting question. So in other words, in your first feature branch, say you wanted to preserve those changes, but you wanted to keep working on a new branch. I think you can do that with a stash. So you would stash the changes. You would probably have to create a new feature branch, and then you would go and reapply the changes that you stashed from your feature branch. I think the only problem with that is if you've already committed, then you're not going to be able to stash anything, because at that point,
right,
you're not there. So that's a little interesting. I'm not sure. I think at that point, the only way, so if you've made changes and if you've committed those changes to your feature branch, I think the only way to actually get to where you want to be is through the magic of the tool that we're building that we're not ready to share yet.
Right. So you could conceivably, if you were in the situation where you have changes, but let's say, for instance, the changes you have depend on something that's coming down, so that you cannot complete your work, or there's no point in completing your work until you get the work that exists out on the repo. The thing to do would be to not commit it at all, but instead stash it, do all this magic that we did here to pull the code back in, pull it down, go back to your master branch, create a new fork, and then apply that stash on there. That makes sense?
Yeah. The other thing you might be able to do, if you want to experiment with this, we could, is you pushed to origin master, but you could probably also force push this to origin my first feature. Okay.
Yeah, I know that works, because when I was testing on this, I was testing on our fork of GitHub Compendium where we were not working on master. So
Got
I
it.
basically transposed all this stuff to not using master, but using a different branch, and it worked exactly the same.
Got it. So just beware if you do that, it is going to wipe it out if you
Right.
make commits. So
Like whatever branch you're doing over here, when you do this, you could do upstream my first feature. Push origin, whatever, my first feature. But again, that will wipe out my first feature when you do that. So be aware of that. Do we have any? I actually don't have the YouTube where I can see the chat. Do we have?
Just looking over there. So Jace was just mentioning that Git Bash is available if you install Git on Windows. So
Cool.
Just confirming that. There's like a special Git Bash thing that makes it Bash-like.
So you don't even need Cygwin. You can this would just be on whatever the current state of the Windows shell is.
Yeah, it's either that or I don't know if maybe they've bundled something, some version of Bash. I also know that Windows has Bash now too, so who knows? But there is Git Bash, and it makes it a consistent experience.
Okay, cool, excellent. That is kind of a drag that you have to go back to the command line. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, that's kind of, I think, maybe the least satisfying part of our whole experience here. And we definitely have talked about ways that we can get this out of it. What we don't know right now is we don't know of any API way to do all the stuff that we just did. If we could figure out if that was available from the GitHub API, we could actually try to bundle that in the same tool that we're working on. So that could basically be the thing that controls every touch of your work to GitHub. We could like mediate it through there. But like I said, we don't even technically know if that's possible at this point because we haven't explored those APIs.
So if you're watching, and if you happen to know how to do this sort of upstream synchronization stuff from the API or some other way, just let us know.
Let us know at any of the ways. You can leave a comment on the YouTube video or on Twitch or Dave Slusher Now on Twitter, Nereus Now on Twitter.
I'm sure you'll find a way to find us. So
okay, all right. Do you want to take over at this point?
Yeah, we'll do. So at this point, Dave mentioned is we are going to kind of hop around a little bit with our topics, and the big issue right now is I don't have enough pull requests for Hacktoberfest. So I need to do some work to actually get 2 more pull requests. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just work on the points thing app a little bit. And in particular, there was some code that I had started to write a while back, and it's sort of just sitting there in the repository, not really fully realized. And so the goal is to put a little bit more structure on that and make it work. And hopefully that'll make it easier for contributors as well, because if you're a contributor and you see a bunch of dead code, you're going to think, well, that just needs to go away. And so the goal is to make it working code. So with that, if I can actually find my Skype window, which is the problem at the moment, there it is on the other screen. Share. There we go. And let me just go to my developer instance. I'm also going to go to my personal Slack workspace. This is where I have my own version of the bot set up and responding to events and whatnot, so we can actually see what this is looking like. So as you can see, I was playing with this a little bit before, and I was actually testing out as part of the merging process when I was bringing in the randomization. I was testing this out, and I was seeing random messages come through. So this is working nicely. Now, if I go and look at the app, just fire up Studio here. What this is currently missing, actually, that is not the right app. Let's go to points thing. So what we're doing today is every time a point comes in, we're looking up a record for that user in this Slack user table. And if we actually look at what these look like, come on. There we go.
At least your instance is awake. That puts you ahead of me.
Yes, there is that. So the right now this thing is just going into this Slack user table, and it is saying go to the points column and increment it. And so as points are given, we increment that thing, and we always know what the current number of points is. But this leaves some things to be desired. And because there have been ideas floated around, like, how do we tell who gave who points? And how do we tell, what if we want to track other points? Maybe points that aren't pluses, but points that are, maybe that was funny, or maybe there was, we're not going to do minuses, but is there some other kind of special point classification? And then more interestingly, what if we wanted to track points in random versus general versus code review? Because if you've got a lot of points in random or some joke channel, maybe that's less impactful than points in the general channel or somewhere else. So the goal with this Slack point table, which is really not fully built out at this point, was to say every time a point comes in, we're going to store details about the point, and we're going to then basically be able to do more rich kinds of reporting and things like that as stuff comes in. So that's really my goal, is to build a little bit of this out today and see if we can get that points table working from incoming events. So with that, let me just first get back to the basics. And if we say thing plus plus, I want to see this thing actually flow through and make sure it's working so that we can reason sanely about this. Looks like it might not be working. Right off the bat, we might have some troubleshooting to do. Can I do slackbot plus plus? While that's going, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the main UI and we're going to take a look at this table. Something we ran into last week was the Slack Events API was actually having some issues. So there was a notice out on the Slack status website saying, we're sorry, but these things are delayed. And so that made it a little bit difficult to live code on this whole points concept. If we go into the Slack users table, oh, there's thing now. If we look at Slack events. Okay, so well, it looks like what's happening is we found thing and we incremented the points for thing, but we never actually responded back, which tells me that there's a token issue. And actually now that I say that out loud, I know exactly what the problem is. And it is that before I committed these final changes back to GitHub, I went in and I cleared out my Slack token property so that I wouldn't be leaking my Slack token via the Git repo. So that is the issue that we've got. So with that, I guess I need to do a little configuration. Actually, I don't care. I don't even care about the messages coming back. All I care about is the messages coming in. So what we're doing right now is, if I look at this business rule, we've got this business rule called process points. And this thing is running on the Slack events table. Yep, so it's running on Slack event, and this is the thing that goes out there and it actually looks up, go to this Slack user table and increment the thing. So what we actually want is, instead of just going into the Slack user table, we want to initialize a record in the Slack point table, store the point there with some associated metadata. Now, before I do, there's an extremely important thing that I need to do before I start my code. And this is where the whole stream just dropped last time when I said that, when we were talking with when we had Andrew on the call last week, and that is create a branch. So I'm just going to call this feature dash points table. And so even though I'm working on the master repository, I'm still doing this with the same contribution workflow for two reasons. One is it allows me to leave the master branch clean, and I can always go back there if I need to, but also so I can get some pull requests and a t-shirt.
Right. When you said you needed 2 more pull requests, specifically, that's what you need, is you need two more for the t-shirt.
Of course. What nobler cause than a t-shirt to do some pull requests?
Yeah, so, I've already put in for mine, and that was one of those things where I realized like how cheaply I can be bribed. It's actually not to my credit.
It is brilliant. So it's getting people involved in open source and public projects, and so it's pretty crazy. So all right, so I'm in my feature branch now, and I need my table. So I've got this Slack points point table. I don't really love that, but that's just the way it is. And now I'll go into that business rule again called process points. And instead of just adding code inline, we eventually want to refactor this out into script includes. And so I'm just going to say insert point. And I'll have to pass some things into that in a minute, but we'll get to that in a second. So what we want to do is first say gr point, and we're going to go into that point table. Now, in order to actually figure out what I need to put in there, let's go take a look at it. So here's a Slack points table. When I started building this out, the idea was that we would have a giver, and so this was the person actually handing the point out. We've got the target, and the target is currently a reference to the Slack users table, which actually could be an interesting problem if, well, I guess it's creating users for things, so that's fine. So never mind. The source event, so the idea is that we want to actually tie this back to the event that came in from Slack, and then, of course, the actual text of what it was. So those are the things we need to populate.
And so text is going to be the full message that came in?
Yeah, text will be the whole message. And so the idea, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this point, but the idea is to say that we could come back later and see the context around the point as it was handed out, and if there was something useful there. So,
okay.
So what I need to do, I think what probably makes the most sense is I'm just going to pass this whole payload object directly into this method, because I don't want to have to split this apart into a whole bunch of parameters. And so I'm going to say payload. And we're just going to say gr point dot initialize. And unlike the users table where we have to go out there and figure out does it exist, we just have to insert this. So so we got payload object, and inside the object there's the event. And so actually what I need to do is I need to open up the event table so I can look at an example of an event, because I don't remember it off the top of my head. So event user is the giver. So we'll just say gr point dot set value giver payload dot event dot user. We're just going to work through each of these. So the target, this is where things get, I'll come back to the target in a moment. So the source event we know is current dot, oh, so this is actually a problem because we need to know what current is. So I need to pass in, I'm just going to do that. And we'll figure this out later. Set value, what do we call that? We call that source event. That should be current.getUniqueValue. And just to see if this works, I'm just going to leave it like this, and we'll keep adding code to it in a minute. So we'll insert that. And then up here, what we're going to do, I guess we have to do this. That gets interesting. So I guess we have to do this inside the matches. We'll do this right before we insert into the Slack user table, right after we check to see if a user is giving themselves points. So I'll say insert point current payload. And of course, what this is not doing right now is properly setting the target. But again, we'll get to that in a second.
Well, hold on a second, Josh. Do you need to do that under that other part? Because you're going to want the reference to the user, which may be getting created.
Yeah, I think you're actually right. That's a really good catch. So actually, let's take a look. Where are we creating the user? So we're going down. We're saying points equals points plus 1. update. So what really should happen at some point is, well, wait a second, where is the user? So add user ID is that.
Yeah. So gr Slack user is the reference to the user at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you're gonna have to also pass them in.
Yeah, you are correct. So, yeah, and so actually, the more I think about this, as we think about this model, I think the final version of this is going to look a little bit different than what we're looking at right now, because I don't kind of like this whole inserting two things dependent of each other the way it is, but we'll get to that. So current, I guess I should say user, and then payload. And then when we call it, we'll say gr Slack user and payload. And then I guess now that we have a reference to that user, we can just go ahead and do this. So it should be target. And target is going to be user.getUniqueValue.
Yeah.
So we're just getting the sys ID. So in theory, that should be it. And we'll just see if it is. So I'll go back to Slack and we'll say thing ++, Slackbot ++. And we'll wait for those to come in. And it did appear to take a few moments for them to come in. But just in case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also bring up the Slack users table so we can see if those values are incrementing. So right now it's at 10 and 2. There is no new Slack point, which means something didn't go well. Let me just do a quick peek at the system logs to see if anything is just standing out, and if it's not, then we'll dig a little further. Payload is not defined, so I am not passing in something correctly. It's because it's not called payload, it's called payload object.
That will do it.
Yes, it will. Here we go. Let's try that again. Whoops. Not the real Slack. I want this Slack here.
I think you may have had. Did you have a stray character after thing, or was that just?
I did. Yeah. I had a I had a underscore, so now we have a new target. So, but this did work. So it actually we got the giver, we got the target. If we go in there, we have a reference to the source event. So this is cool. What this also means is that if I let me just do this now. I'm going to configure the related lists, and we'll look at the source event related list, add that in there. And so if I do one like this that says thing ++, Slackbot ++, those are both in the same event, and so they're going to get linked. So let's take a look. Let's go back here. Back. There's the source event. Should have 2 items in it, and it does. So we're already starting to get, I think, a little bit better control of the context of where these are coming from. And then the last thing I want in here is the text, and so I just need to add that in. So if I go and say set value text, and that's going to be payload.event.text. If I remember correctly. And so now we can do that one more time. Copy those and paste them. Let's just go back to Slack points. And there it is. And there we have the text in line as well. So we are capturing all of that. So I think ultimately what I would want to do, and we only have 10 minutes left, so I kind of want to, I don't want to go too terribly far with this, and we can start to wind down, is ultimately what I want to do with this is start not directly incrementing the points the way we are on the user record itself, but instead saying when we insert points, we could calculate the sum total of points at that moment. So that would be one way we could do it. The only concern with that is then we're doing a database query. I guess it would be a glide aggregate to count them every time. Maybe a little bit less efficient than just incrementing a counter, but we do get a lot more data this way. So one other thing I guess I can do in the remaining time we've got is, do we have the channel in the event? I think we do. So here is the event.channel. I think I'm not going to go as far as actually creating a channel table. I'm just going to add a channel to this Slack point. So I'm going to say, I don't know why my list view got all screwed up here, so I'm just going to do this manually. I'm going to say this is a string, and it's a channel, and 40. And then in this business rule, I can just add that as well. So I'll do one more test here. And then if this stores the channel, I'm going to go ahead and do my commit and create the pull request. I guess what I need to do is put a couple more columns out there. And there we go. So we are storing the channel now as well.
All right, fantastic.
So I'm going to go ahead and commit this, and this should give me a nice tidy list of things that we've changed. So what we're going to say is start storing points in points table. I'll just leave it at that. And then when this is done, I'm going to go to GitHub.
Jace is saying, do that in the list layout, not personalize. Because everyone wants it, not just you. Remember to do that in the future.
Do what in the list layout?
Rather than personalize to add your created time.
Do
that in the list layout rather than personalizing your own view.
Fair enough. And just to throw out my own excuse for that, I haven't given a lot of thought to what we want the defaults to be. So
yeah,
that can be my second pull request.
There you go.
So at this point, this is very, very purpose specific. We're just going to insert stuff into this table. And anyway, so I'm in this feature points table, and then even though I'm not in a different fork, I'm on the master repo. And this is something to keep in mind for your own projects is, you could do something like this as well. So in this case, the base is master, comparing it to the feature points table, and I'm just going to go ahead and create this pull request. And now, just because did you bring this up at the beginning, the Hacktoberfest interface? I can't remember. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just going to log in here. Well, I'm already signed up, but I'm just going to click register. Okay, that's how it works. And now if I go back to the main page, I can check my progress, and I should have 3, and I do. So I've got 1 contribution to the Slack points thing. I just need 1 more. And I'm actually surprised that as we get closer and closer to the 31st, that the pull request rate is decreasing. I would have thought that this would just be going up and up and up. But anyway.
like by my math, I'm pretty sure that DigitalOcean is giving away at least 15,000 shirts.
That's impressive.
So we're talking like, somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of shirts and postage here.
That is impressive. So, and pretty cool. So that's really all I had today. I didn't, obviously there's lots more stuff that we can do with Points Thing, but the whole point of Points Thing is to let our community do it. So I'm going to continue to maybe close a few of the gaps on the features that I started and never finished, just so that there's some clarity around it, and then take more of a step back and focus on merging in people's pull requests.
And one of the things that I said I was going to do and I did not do, and I will get that done this weekend, so that anybody who wants to do this can do that next week, is I had said I would set up just a basic shell of automated test, so that anybody who wants to engage in this, isn't sure what to do, could just write some automated tests. And each automated test would be perfect. Like write one test, and then that would be one pull request, right? So write one test, like an issue. So basically I would file an issue saying, write a test for this webhook, write a test for this form, write a test for this, whatever. So at that point, we could write a test where you submit a record to the events, right? It doesn't have to be a real event. It can just have some dummy data in it. And then when we're done, we want to verify that it incremented by one the user in the Slack user, right? That would be the assertion. So I will set up that stuff over the weekend. So by Monday that will exist. The problem that I found, that I ran into a chicken and egg problem, which is that if you the first step of an automated test typically is you impersonate a user, right? So I created the Slack test user, and then I realized that I cannot automatically push the Slack test user via the repo. So what I'm going to have to do is everybody who wants to do this, who wants to test with this and wants to run it on their own local instance, is going to have to set up their own Slack test user. And so I believe that I'm going to try to do this via export. And I think that this should work, because what we need is everybody to have the same sysid, so that the reference in the user that they're impersonating as the first step of the ATF, we all have the same sysid, which is the Slack test user. And I think what I will do then is somehow or another, like get that export file as fixed script to create the user. Could I do a fixed script?
So fixed scripts don't have access to the scope. Basically, you have scoping considerations there. So that becomes a challenge. One thing you could do, I don't know what this would look like exactly, but if you could, I was going to say, could you create an attachment somehow?
I was going to create an XML file as an attachment and like put it in GitHub somehow, like attach it to the issues or something like that.
Yeah, so somebody's asking in the over on the Slack side, can you not add a user to a scoped app as application file? Yeah, and you cannot. And if you think about the reasons for that, one of the issues is that one of the sort of fundamental philosophies of scoped apps, if you will, is that scoped apps should not impact scopes that are not their own or scopes that they don't directly have access to. And so you wouldn't want a scoped app that could go out there and modify your users table. Or insert records into other tables, because then that brings in all sorts of weird implications. Like, could it create script includes, or could it create other stuff that you don't want it to? And so that's my understanding of why you can't do that.
Right. What if your application file in your scoped app included an admin user? Now you kind of have a security hole there in your scoped app, right? So that is. In fact, I tried to do that, and what you get is an error saying that you cannot add sys user table to scoped application app files. You're welcome to try it. You will get the same error as me, which says you can't do this.
Yeah. But there are other ways to do it, and this is I think it's reasonable to say that you would have some kind of data export or application export that would be a companion to your app if you want example data. And then especially for the developer workflow like this, it's even more reasonable. So There's something else I was going to say, and I totally forgot what it was. So that must mean it's close to time to be done.
I think it is close to be time to done. I can't even speak. So last call for any questions. Jace is saying, first, fixed scripts are in the scope, and you can set the new GUID value on the glide record. I'm pretty sure, for the same reason we can't set it to an application file, that we cannot write to sysuser from the scope. I just don't think that that's going to work. I'm willing to try it, but I don't think it's going to work. So I'm going to make a note to give that a shot tonight, but I don't believe that that's the scoping issue is no different doing a fixed script versus an application file. I think it's just fundamentally the act of adding users from the scope, I think, is not doable.
Yeah. Now you could do a fixed script that talk to your own tables in the scope. So I mean, fixed scripts as a concept are available. It's just the cross-scope privilege thing that's the issue.
Right.
So, but yeah, we'll definitely verify that. And the other thing is, we obviously October is almost over, but that doesn't mean that you should stop working on this. So we hope that if you're interested in contributing, that you continue to do so, even if it's not for the t-shirt, because it's just cool, and you get to see your code running live in the Slack channel.
We can maybe this is not a promise, but maybe there may be like a live coding happy hour shirt that we can create for people who contribute. So you can get 2 shirts out of this deal, possibly, potentially. I promise nothing, but we'll see what we can do on that front. So,
do we need a safe harbor slide?
Yeah, safe harbor. Past performance is not indicative of future t-shirts, and I might be talking out of my ass, and this may not be real, but it's possible. So it all depends
on our minds.
It's on our minds and a budget request. So we'll see. All right. With that, what do you feel about your beer?
So actually, this is a really, really good beer. It is a solid 4 stars for me. The Orange Door from Sketchbook.
This one is not doing it for me as much. It's kind of got that soy saucy taste to it. It's not as mapley as I expected. It's not as I just don't love it that much. I'm going to give this a 3.25. So
yeah. Not horrible, not great.
Not horrible. I've got 3 more pints of it after this one, so I got to learn to make my peace with it, or find some friends who like it. So there you go.
Got to figure out how to incorporate it into some kind of, I don't know, something. Otherwise, it becomes like so. This time of year is pumpkin beer time, and I had pumpkin beer in my fridge for 2 years or something like that because just need to cut my losses and throw it away. But anyway,
either bake with it, I guess, as an option, or try to find some kind of black and tan thing where it's like, all right, let's find another beer to pour it in and see what alchemy we can do.
Yes.
It's not going to make it much worse. So I think it's only going to go up. It's actually not terrible. I mean, this is actually a taxonomical problem with Untapped, right? I don't have a lot of 1 stars. I don't have a lot of 2 stars. I basically rate between 3, 5, and 4.25. So even though it's a 1 to 5 star by quarter points, in fact, my effective range is less than a star in practice. It's a real big problem.
So I guess I would interpret that in one of 2 ways. One is that you just do a good job of picking beer that's not completely horrible.
True.
And so that's probably one. And the other is, if you like beer, sometimes you're a little bit more forgiving. It's like all pizza is good pizza or something like that. Even the bad pizza is good pizza. Well, yeah. Maybe not always. But anyway, we digress.
All right. Thank you for listening. All right. Somebody suggests, David Jones suggests using it for shooting practice. That's possible. Okay.
That's a possibility.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for everyone who's contributing. And if you haven't, I didn't get to be a part of the launch last week, but this is really and truly exciting stuff. We're extremely happy to get to play in this world, right? But Josh came up with this idea. It's all his idea. Came up with it at GitHub Universe, partly from the energy that's in the room. And we thought, how can we be a part of this? And so we kind of went out and built a thing to make us basically able to play in the same way that everyone else there was. We're trying to bring us basically to feature parity, which we're not going to ever get there, but we're kind of closing the gap. And so powerful, fun stuff, and I'm super glad we can be a part of it. The only problem is that we started so late in the month, and now that we have this stuff, we'll refine it, and by next year we'll be on it from day one. So, all right, with that, thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Andrew, from last week, and all the absent friends. And we will see you next week.
See ya. Have a good weekend.